Okay, let's get into it. So tonight we're going to be talking about something that affects so many of us, neurodivergent people. And neurodivergent covers a wide range, but I'm focusing on autistic and ADHD. Thanks, Catherine, for letting me know. So with that in mind, one of the questions that I get a lot is, how do you know if it's just tiredness and exhaustion just from being really tired, compared to how do you know if it's autistic burnout or ADHD burnout or ADHD burnout, so autistic and ADHD burnout together? And all of those things are really different. I experienced ADHD burnout quite significantly a few years ago, and I remember sitting on the edge of my bed and I just felt frozen, and I felt work, you need to do this, you need to do that, but I couldn't do that. Even though I could almost see myself and I could talk, not talk, but talk in my head, I couldn't make myself do it. I just felt frozen. And I felt like I was just done and that I had nothing left to give. I worked with someone to help me recover from that, and I learned a lot in that process. At the moment, I'm really aware that I'm kind of teetering on the edge and putting in a lot of supports for myself, because I can see myself heading towards ADHD burnout, which is different to ADHD burnout. But I am putting supports in place, and it's where I'm going to actually break down the difference between those things in a moment. But I'm really cognizant of this, and so I am putting those supports in place to try and stop me getting to that complete burnout point. One of the things that we often do is we push through, and we keep saying, I'm fine, I should be able to cope with this, and you keep going and you keep going and keep going until you crash. So lots of us don't even realize that we're in burnout until we've crashed or ended up in hospital. I work with so many people that only realize they're in burnout when they were physically so unwell that they needed So when you're tired, tiredness is something that everyone experiences at some point or another. It's part of being human. And it can be that we didn't get a good night's sleep, for example, or we have jobs that we're working at night and our sleep patterns are all over the place. Or we've had a massive day and we're exhausted from a massive day, or we're sick. The main thing is, though, if it's just tiredness, it resolves with rest. So if you are tired and you rest and you sleep, that will resolve itself and you start to recover and recharge. When it is ADHD burnout, so this is all about that cumulative cost of the cognitive load and the cognitive effort that we as ADHD adults spend compensating for our executive function differences every single day. So, for example, it's about managing all the different appointments, or managing, organising our kids, or managing getting out on time, getting out of the house on time to, say, an appointment or to work, for example. And if we are an ADHDer, there's a number of reasons that this is really, really difficult on a day-to-day basis. And so that accumulates on our cognitive load, which can lead to ADHD burnout. So that is something that I'm putting in lots of supports for myself at the moment, because I can see that I'm teetering and I'm heading that way. because I'm running my own company and it's getting busier and busier, which is awesome. It also means that I'm having to balance lots of different things, and I haven't quite got all the systems in place that are going to support me with that. So the cognitive load that is taking is quite big. And then we think about autistic burnout. So autistic burnout is the exhaustion or withdrawal or those executive function issues. We might see a general reduction in our functioning. So, you know, the skills that we could do before, we can't do now. I'm just going to pause for one moment and just check on the comments. Okay, so I'm just going to let people know I'm live in the channel. Okay, so when we look at autistic burnout then, so we might have those skills that we could do before, but we can't do. It's almost like we experience a bit of a regression. And we might see an increase in our autistic traits. So we're needing to engage in things that are really supportive for our autistic neurotype. One of the big things that came out in some research conducted by Ileana Maggiati that was published last year, and she's from the University of Western Australia, she did a huge piece of research that looked at, I think it was about 48 pieces of literature and research with over 4,000 autistic people being interviewed and studied and part of different studies. And what she found in this is autistic burnout can be chronic, but we can have intermittent crisis. So rather than this steady decline. So that is one thing that's really important to understand, because lots of people say to me, you know, I feel some days, you know, like I'm okay, but then I completely drop, you know, for a week or so. And this is part of what she's talking about. It's this underlying chronic autistic burnout. So this hamster wheel that we're on, and then we keep, you know, dusting ourselves and getting back on. But then when we fall off and we can't get back on, that's that intermittent crisis. And then maybe we do recover and recharge a bit and we get back on, and then we're back on that hamster wheel, but we're still in chronic autistic burnout because we didn't properly recover and recharge in order to get out of our autistic burnout. And this is where I often hear people say, describe it as, I feel empty, I feel numb, it's like I'm not really there. A lot of people really struggle to properly describe it, and that can be part of being alexithymics and not having the words or language to describe what it feels like. I'd be really interested from people, if you've experienced this, what words would you like use to describe? Jasmine, do you get tired a lot and then get going? Yeah. So we see that intermittent part of it, but it might be that chronic burnout overall. So now, if you are ADHD like me, autistic and ADHD, you can experience both at once. Okay, so it's really important to understand. Whilst there are a couple of different impacts, there's distinctions between ADHD burnout and autistic burnout, which I just talked about. If you're ADHD, you can have both at the same time, but you don't always have both at the same time. So one of the things that I say to people is, when you sleep and when you rest, does it restore you? Because if it does, if you're able to rest and it really does restore you, then it's more likely to be tiredness. Because if you can say rest for days, but you still feel just as depleted, that's burnout, not tiredness. I'm just going to have a quick look at the comments. Jody, can it look like I'm functioning at work because I'm a people pleaser and can't do simple things? Jody, absolutely. Yes, because what you do, remember that hamster wheel we talked about? So you're putting your stress response is kicking in. So you're fawning and you're a people pleaser and you go to work. But then you can only do that and then you shut down at home because you're in that complete burnout state. Now, sometimes what we see, so that is when we talk about chronic burnout and intermittent crisis. Sometimes what we see is you get to the point where you're no longer able to go to work because your burnout has got to a point that you're just not able to do that. So it's really important to put in the supports before you get to that point. And we're going to talk about the supports. So if we just think about, and remember, I'm going to share this with everyone. Tiredness, you feel tired, but you rest, you sleep, and you recover. ADHD burnout, so this could be the brain fog, difficulty concentrating, forgetfulness. Like, for example, recently, I've missed 2 appointments, even though they were in my calendar, even though they had reminders come up. I missed them. So that's a sign for me that I need to really put in more supports. We might see in ADHD increased irritability, that emotional reactivity. There might be a noticeable decline in those things that you could do before, and it does build gradually. I'm just checking comments. Okay, one moment. Okay, so autistic burnout, it's that exhaustion, but it is paired with withdrawal. So this is a really key distinction. So you're pulling back, and so from people and from environments. There's a reduction in your executive function across daily life, and not just work, or we're holding it together at work, but we just can't at home. Those increased manifestation of autistic traits during those burnout crises or episodes. One of the things that I want to touch on, because I think this is something that isn't well understood, is that when we are in burnout, we are sometimes still able to go and do some of the things that we enjoy. So, for example, when I was experiencing ADHD burnout, I still went swimming, especially ocean swimming. And that's one of the reasons how I knew it wasn't depression and it was burnout. Okay, because I was able to do some of the things that did recharge me. Okay, and that's a really important distinction. It's also really important then not to dismiss someone based on that, because I often hear a lot, well, if you're really in burnout, you wouldn't go for a swim. That's simply not true. Okay, so this is something that is supportive, but this is a big distinction between burnout and depression. If it was depression, it's likely that you wouldn't be able to do that. If it's burnout, you often can do, some things that are recharging for you. I'm just going to have a look at comments. And Kirsty, I end up sleeping most of the weekends because I'm so tired. And and Kirsty, that's a really interesting comment, and it's something I see a lot. And it's that chronic burnout with those intermittent crises. So what's happening is you're surviving, but you're on that hamster wheel. You're in that chronic burnout, but you crash on the weekends. So that's that intermittent crisis. Obviously, I don't know all the details of everyone, but just this is based on some of the things that you are sharing with me. Okay, so let's go into, well then, what do we do then? How do we support tiredness, ADHD burnout, autistic burnout? So tiredness, like we talked about, is about sleep. It's about rest. It's about hydration, you know, all of those things. Those things, you know, when people have said to me, well, just go and have a sleep in, or you need to drink more water. That's not fixing my ADHD burnout, I can tell you that. Kitty, yes, but it's only that one thing and nothing extra. Yeah, Kitty, thank you very much. That's a really good point. And it is only that one thing. Absolutely. And that's, again, the mistake that happens. You know, well, you were able to go for a swim, so surely you can. Nope, I cannot. One thing. So thinking about our supports for ADHD burnout. So it's really about reducing the executive function load directly. So, for example, a family I was working with recently, and their daughter is in quite significant ADHD burnout. But one of the things we were looking at is in terms of chores, say one of the chores is to do the dishwasher. So instead of doing the dishwasher, if they really want to keep that chore up, then maybe it's just one shelf of the dishwasher, so it's only got one step, rather than the executive function load involved in 3 levels of the dishwasher. So thinking about that, just one part. Hi, Jasmine, nice to see you. So reduce the executive function load directly, reducing commitments. What can be put aside? What can be taken out to reduce some of the commitments and load, cognitive load and executive function load? It's also really worth having a conversation with your medical clinician about whether the current supports, maybe there's medications, maybe there's some different adjustments, whether those still fit. And any of the standard generic advice that we have all been given, and we could probably all say this together, like, well, just keep going, just push through, you'll be fine, you'll get through this. It doesn't work. In fact, it makes it worse. And I know we get this, but a lot of people don't understand that, especially when they see us go and do one thing. So autistic burnout, so this is about finding safe people and safe spaces. And this is really important. People have said to me, oh, you need to learn to unmask. It's not as simple as that. I need to feel safe. And often I'm not aware that I'm masking all the time. So that's really, it's putting a load of pressure and shame onto me. So who are your safe people and where are your safe spaces? Is it possible to lower the sensory load at times? Now, this isn't always possible. Some things are well out of our control. And social demands. So give yourself permission to say no. And say, you know, thanks for the invitation, but actually I need to spend tomorrow at home. So it's giving yourself permission to say no and to take a step back if that's what you need to do to just lower the social demands. Utilize those activities that you enjoy, like I was talking about before. Those are actually really, really important. But like Kitty said, it might only be one thing. So it's not about, okay, you love rock climbing, we're going to do lots and lots of rock climbing. Nope. But just because a person is in burnout, don't take away that thing that really recharges them. Okay, that's really important. And don't judge them because they're able to do that one thing that really recharges them. And standard depression treatments like behavior activation, they can actually make it worse. If you force me out and force me to do things, that's probably going to compound everything and make my burnout so much worse and perhaps lead me down from burnout into also additional depression, which is absolutely possible, and you can have both at the same time. So really, really key things to think about. Tiredness and burnout, not the same thing. ADHD burnout and autistic burnout are different too. Okay, the causes can still be very similar, like cognitive load, camouflaging, and camouflaging is one of the biggest predictors of burnout for both ADHD burnout and autistic burnout and ADHD burnout. Okay, but sometimes it helps to understand. So for me, I've been reflecting the last few days, and I realised it's probably ADHD burnout for me. And that for me then thinks, okay, I'm going to get some help in order to put some systems in place to reduce the load on my executive function. So it's not that I need to withdraw. I need to think about how to support my executive function. And the supports, like we were talking about, are different for each. One of the things I said to someone recently when they said, oh, you just need to go and have a coffee, have some time by yourself and have a coffee. And I remember going, coffee is not going to fix anything. I mean, I love coffee, but it's not going to fix ADHD burnout. So coffee won't fix burnout, because burnout, it's not about sleep. It's not about coffee. It's not just, oh, I need a break and an hour away having coffee by myself is going to fix that. It's much more than that. And it's really coming back to what is impacting our capacity. So what are all those micro stresses on a daily basis that erode our capacity down to the nitty gritty? I'm interested if you have any questions or comments as you think about that. If this hits home and if this is really resonating and you're thinking, I really want to explore this more, and there's absolutely no pressure, but in my done method, we're going to be unpacking this in much more detail in order for you to be able to identify what those micro stresses are that are eroding your capacity and probably contributing to your burnout, and then supports that can help you. That's my done method. And as I said, I'm going to share this handout that I've made. But does anyone have any questions or comments? And I'm going to just wait a minute because I know that there can be a delay in this. Any questions or comments? I'm just checking another. Right. Okay, no, I don't think there's any questions or comments. So I just want to say thank you very, very much for your time tonight. I hope you found it useful. Oh, Jody, this feels very much like me and has been for a while, I think. First of all, I want you to know you're not alone. It's really, really confronting to think about this. But it is good to think about this because it means that you can get the right kind of support and start, hopefully, thinking about what recovery might look like for you. I'm just going to have another look. Kitty, there's a lot of contributors to how long burnout lasts. Push burnout, when it finally hits, it will take so long. Yes, absolutely. So burnout can last an incredibly long time. And it's not a matter of hours or days. It can be weeks and months or even years for some people. So it's really, really long. Jody, I don't remember what it's like to not feel like this. Yeah, I really, really hear you. And please reach out. I'm really happy to chat about this. And hopefully you have supports in place and people that you can speak with and get support. But if not, please contact me. I'm always happy to have a chat. Steph, thanks, Steph. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone.